What is going on, YouTube? Today we are looking at the 7th story in my collection, The Crumbling of a Nation and Other Stories. And that story is the Termination Bureau. I started writing this story the day after Roe v. Wade was overturned. Like my story, It Was Just Another Day in America, it was an extremely cathartic experience to write this story, because it helped me to get a lot of anger out of it. When I wrote this story, my objective wasn't just to present a world post-abortion, but to really point out the hypocrisy behind the pro-life movement. Because at the end of the day, we have seen time and time again that this movement doesn't really care about human beings. What they do care about, though, is making sure that that human being is born. Once the human being is born, they stop caring about it. And though they will deny this, we see this continuously through their actions and through their votes. Because if they were truly pro-life, they would do everything in their power to make sure that every person has access to a quality life. This means that they would not fight against a person's access to healthcare. They would not consider free school lunches a waste of tax money. They would not be arguing against education. They would not be fighting against DEI, because it helps people of different genders, races, and religions to have access to things that were previously inaccessible. And they would be doing everything in their power to address the reasons that so many women get abortion, which is not simply because they got pregnant and they don't want the baby. There are a multitude of reasons for a person getting an abortion, with the person's desire to have a child being just a fraction of it. Because there are many people who do want to have a child that end up having an abortion. And by making abortions inaccessible to women like this, they're actually putting those women's lives in jeopardy, which is something that seems very antithetical to being pro-life. But again, they don't care enough about human life to do anything about the real issue. Instead, what we are seeing is something that we see all the time in the Christian American movement: a lack of understanding the nuances of the issues, instead simply seeing it as a box to check to make sure that they are being a good Christian in America. Which is why we often see Christians in America doing things that seem incredibly unchristian. This is yet another example of hypocrisy that I try to point out in this story. Here's a sneak peek of the story. As Officer Tommy looked over the files, he could see the waiting room full of patients, both young and old, through the window on the eastern wall. Each patient had their reason for being there that day, all rehearsing those reasons in their heads as they waited their turn. Whenever the door to the waiting room opened, the room went immediately quiet, every whisper hushing, all eyes turned toward the door, at the secretary standing there, hoping their name would finally be called, wanting nothing more than to get this horrible, regretful day over with. "Jocelyn Adams," said the secretary. "That's me," a nervous voice said. A 13-year-old girl stood, her big pregnant belly nearly knocked over the little kids playing in front of her. She stepped over a couple of babies as she made her way to the door. "Excuse me," she said. "Excuse me." The secretary looked her up and down disgustedly as she watched this little kid approach her. She said. "Follow me." And so Jocelyn Adams followed her to the back. The door closed, and the waiting room once more filled with whispers, this time about the pregnant little girl. Officer Tommy concluded that all the paperwork was in order, so he stood and made his way to the safes across the way, 12 in total, one for each officer on staff. The safes were lined up just below the window looking into the waiting room. For a moment, Officer Tommy studied the faces inside. The tears, the pain, the hopelessness, the nervousness, the shame. Then he waved with a smile. But the patients did not wave back. If you would like to hear more about the inspiration behind or the sneak peeks of my stories, as well as learn about the books that inspired my writing, make sure to subscribe. And if you're interested in following me on other platforms, I am also on TikTok, Instagram, and Substack. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.